The following recording is from the Women's Empowerment Roundtable leading up to the annual conference occurring March 13th. The following roundtable will highlight how to build professional presence and confidence in the workplace. Joining us, we have special guest Jennifer Walton, Associate Vice President of Marketing at Nationwide Retirement Institute. Dr. Lisa Coleman, Denison alum, Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation at New York University. Alexandra Panofska, also a Denison alum, Intelligence Analyst for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy.
I don't mind going first. I love the question around role models, mainly because it's so, people may feel like it needs to be someone that is massive or, representing your industry. But quite honestly, and this may also be cliche, my mother is my biggest role model. I'm a mother now myself, and I now recognize that much of who I am is because she instilled it in me. My mom did not attend college, but she was a woman who showed up into a room and you felt, you feel her presence, you feel her warmth, and she walks in as who she is. And she's unapologetic about that. And that was what she passed down to me, which is, Jennifer, you take up space. You take up space where you go. You are someone who has a voice and you can leverage that. I grew up with agency and autonomy in a time where I don't know that was pretty standard. And that's kind of in turn how I raised my little girls. But I think she was the first example for me, particularly as a Black woman, that I saw kind of leaning in before that was a book.
I guess I'll go next. I'll piggyback on that. My biggest role model was my grandmother, and my mother surrounded me with a lot of women who were professionals when I was growing up. So they served as my primary role models in my life. But I also would like to say that because I was a little bit of an introvert as a kid, the other thing that I did was read a lot. And so a lot of my role models also came from those spaces. So people like Toni Morrison, right? Who of course won the first Nobel Prize for Literature. So people like that who just really, I love Adrienne Rich's poetry, right? So all of these people who contributed, I think, to my imagination, to the life of the imagination, which helped me to be curious. And so as someone who works in the academy, it's really been important, that curiosity, as I went through my PhD and all that. And so that's helped me then think about, it allowed me to see people who had that life of the imagination, and particularly that intellectual life. So I would say those are some of the people. And one of my favorite role models right now from business is Mellody Hobson. Yeah, she's a rock star. There's some scientists out there too. I like the first astronaut too. I got her on my Rolodex. So
I took this one a little differently. So I thought, who's my work role model? The FBI is a really agent-driven organization, particularly male agent-driven organization. But there's one senior executive in particular who is an analyst like me and has been a trailblazer for women. She always makes time for mentorship, and I've been really lucky to have a couple of one-on-ones with her, at least when I was still back at headquarters. She's, to me, the kind of leader. The reason why I like her so much is because she never makes it about herself. She's the kind of leader who gives credit to everyone else, and her job is to elevate those around her. And that's an example of transformational leadership to me, empowering those around you and taking the attention off of yourself and giving it to your team. She has really great interpersonal skills, and that, when you're a brand new employee and you meet with a senior executive and she remembers your name and maybe a little tidbit about you, it feels really good. It makes you feel like people care, and she's really warm. And yeah, that would be Nikki for me.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. I love how we had such a wide variety of answers when it comes to mothers or authors. Toni Morrison also has a very special place in my heart. So I'm very happy you brought her up. So also professional mentors and role models all having an influence on us. So that was amazing. Thank you once again for sharing. Next, so since our panelists are very multi-talented, multi-dimensional, how did you know that you chose the right path in your career? Was it a journey, or did you know from the beginning? If you don't mind sharing, and popcorn.
Sure, I can take this one. I've always wanted to work in national security, and for me, the catalyst for that was at Denison. I took a class on terrorism, politically motivated violence by Dr. Davis, who passed away a few years ago. And it just unlocked this passion in me that I didn't really know about. And with the FBI, it took me about 3.5 years to get in, from the moment I applied, background investigation, all the tests, Quantico, until I started my first assignment. And you've really got to want it to be willing to wait that long. And how do I know? I mean, I wake up every day and I feel so honored. It is such a privilege to look out for people and to keep people safe who I will never know. And I have colleagues who work violent crimes against children, and it is just the most rewarding work, knowing that you're doing good work to help other people. And I love it. That's why I like talking about my work, especially to a group of women and young women in particular, since it is a male-dominated organization. But yeah, that's it for me.
Sure. No, I'll go. You know, I'll be honest with you. I'm still evolving. When I was 9, I said I want to be a businesswoman because I wanted to. I read my dad's law school books, and I wanted to wear a nice suit and have nice perfume. But I think what I found when I went to business school and when I came out of it was I started thinking about, what are my values? So what are my values? And if I want to be a businesswoman, let my values lead the kind of work that I do and the kind of companies I choose. So I focused on work. I worked at Abbott Nutrition. I was an associate brand manager for the Similac brand. I now work at Nationwide. I've been in insurance. I'm now on our financial services side. And both of those companies had purpose-driven visions. At Similac, I said I fed babies. I mean, I had a function I performed, but I fed babies. I work for a company now that claims to be more than a business, that we're deeply invested in our community. So to me, it was aligning my values with organizations that had similar values, that the work was purpose-driven. And that's how I even assess my target companies when I'm looking at other opportunities. And sometimes the work evolves. I love talking in general. I'm a very high interactive, collaborative type of person. So a marketing role that I'm in is probably a good function for me. And I've had a lot of success there, but I would say I'm very much guided by my values. And so and something that a mentor told me a long time ago was, hey, direction is more important than speed. So I don't necessarily look at what the corporate ladder looks like. I'm no longer planning my career that way. I go where I feel like my values lead me.
I think my journey is probably a little more circuitous than my other panelists. So I went to Denison. I was basically a triple major, which means I didn't know what I wanted to do. So people now, when I narrate that story, they're like, oh my God, you're just so smart. But that really wasn't the case. It was just that I was like in multiple different subjects. So I did computer science, I did sociology and anthropology, and I also was focused on gender studies. Totally unrelated in many ways, and wrote some theses related to that. And then when I left Denison, I was driven by what I thought was what I was supposed to do. I thought I was supposed to go get a job, so I did that. I tried to go get an MBA. I hated that, Jennifer. I hated that MBA program. I'm 2 classes short, I think, from getting an MBA, but I dropped out because I was like, what is this about? And then I went and worked for the Association of American Medical Colleges, unrelated, did demographic research for them, worked at Merrill Lynch, did work with them in the corporate, worked at the WFC before, World Financial Center, before it went down. And then I transitioned into the academy. So, so I got 3 master's degrees after that, and then a PhD, and then I went to law school. So I love school. That should be obvious. But I also think that I'm a curious person. So that curiosity, that's probably why I was reading all those books, all those authors. And I think that is what has driven my career. And that learning, being in that continuous learning cycle, I think has helped to propel my career. And the only other thing I guess I'll say is that the thing that makes me know that I love my work, I used to work at an institution called Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And when I went to work there in the first year, part of what I do is I work with people, but I work with institutions to help them transform themselves. And so there were 2 people who had health issues. One had a brain tumor, and the other had some pancreatic cancer. And there were policies that were impacting them, that were making it difficult for them to complete their projects, career, etc. One of the first things I did at Harvard was to change those policies. And so as a result, both of them are still alive. We're very good about that, but also were able to complete their projects and to continue on in their careers. And so when I think about transforming organizations, I take the concept from the concept of transformation in the post-apartheid South Africa, which means to transform society, transform organizations, and therefore transform people.
Wow, so many nuggets of wisdom. Thank you all for your answers. I'm blown away, semi-speechless. Moving right along with some of our questions, how does your gender, among other identities, impact the work that you do on a day-to-day basis? Have there been any difficult situations that you've had to navigate with those identities on the forefront?
And I just jump in right here. Wish I could say it's been smooth sailing, but so not. There have been moments where my gender has definitely impacted. So I will say one thing, I teach negotiation. So the first thing I try to do is teach women about how to negotiate contracts. We know that many women are underpaid, undervalued, especially as they go, and particularly in entry-level positions as you all go out. So I'll just volunteer right now. I'll come back and do a little class of negotiation or something like that if people would like. But certainly thinking about that. And I don't just mean salary, right? That's some things we forget to ask about other things. And I'll just tell you this, I live in a 4-bedroom apartment in New York City on Bleecker and Mercer. If you don't know where that is, that's in Greenwich Village, and NYU subsidizes my housing. Again, I teach negotiation. And so, sorry. So I really do try to think about how gender has impacted that role. And I'll just say this, I work on issues of gender. I think about things like if we were to pay women fairly, the GDP would increase by 512 billion just in the United States alone. And then my personal impact in terms of how it's impacted me, I have had to deal with sexual harassment in my positions personally. I've had to navigate with other people, navigating situations around sexual harassment and unfortunately sexual assault. And I've already talked a little bit about the pay gap. And then I also say, one of the things that I say a lot when I'm teaching my seminars, one of my pet peeves is when men steal my ideas and then take them and say that they're their own. And so I also teach a lot of courses on communication, strategies, and sort of negotiating things around meetings and building capacity for gender. And the one thing I will say, and I love the Obama administration when these women did this, so you can look this up online, but that thing about stealing people's ideas and the references, the women who were part of the Obama administration, no critique to Obama, I'm sure he's a great guy, but you know, men sometimes have their ways of overlooking. So they started bonding, and they did what they called, which was a referential, doing references. So when one woman would say something, another woman would reference and say, oh no, that was Jennifer's idea. Jennifer, do you want to say more about your idea? I'm sorry, yes, would you like to say more about your idea, Annie? And so then they would reference one another back and forth, thus cutting off that misdirection. And so I always try to encourage women to build those kinds of networks and partnerships as well.
That was so amazing that I learned a lot myself. Thank you for that. I'm in the class. Please sign me up. I wanted to quickly add too, as you know, I'm in corporate America, which honestly, it has a long ways to go. But I would argue that Alexandra is probably in a much different position than I'm in. And what Dr. Lisa Coleman just expressed, I heard that in a deep way. But I would say that for me, it shows up in a way of psychological safety, right? So I'm a Black woman. I have hair that does not look typical. I have a lot of things. I'm a first generation American. My family's from Bermuda. So there were a lot of things. I feel like when I entered into the corporate world, I was starting from -50. I didn't have parents to tell me to read the annual report of this company prior to stepping foot in the door, right? So there were assumptions made about me based on how I look and how I present that weren't necessarily tied to my identity. They weren't an accurate representation. But so then I was dealing with psychological safety. And I think as women, there's something, and when you include other intersections, the way I position it is when you look at the majority, they have, the way I see it is they have luggage. They're coming into their office environments with tools and resources and things that make it a lot easier for them to come in and do their job. I would say that as women, as a Black woman, if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, you may have baggage, right? So you have all these things that are on you that you're having to navigate while you walk in the door on top of doing your job. So I think that's a little bit of the difference, is that, you know, I walk in, I'm having to make all these decisions and think about things that, say, a white male counterpart may not. And so by nature, they're more psychologically safe to make decisions. And they don't have to second guess everything because of all these other layers that they're presenting with. So I think that's been a struggle for me in my career, is giving myself the reprieve to navigate that.
Yeah, I'd say I'm most aware of my gender when I don't see it reflected in a room or at a meeting or on a conference call. Again, it's a really male dominated organization. The first female special agent wasn't hired until 1972. And so we're playing catch up. Every couple of weeks, you'll get an all-employee email that goes out with leadership announcements, and I know what it's going to say before I even open it up to read it. This white man is now the assistant director of this division. This white man is, you know, head of this. And it's almost like a little pipeline. And you're starting to see women kind of chip away at that. And we have a lot of way to go. There's a lot of room to go. One thing that I've noticed with myself is that language can be really empowering as a woman. And one thing that I've caught myself doing is I try to be more mindful of the language that I use in emails, particularly in comparison to kind of, you know, just daily emails, right? So I noticed that I was starting a lot of my emails with, I just wanted to, blah, 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 blah. I just wanted to send you this. I just wanted to see if you were free. And we're really minimizing ourselves when we do that. I just wanted to. And when Jennifer, when you talk about taking space, when you take away those 3 or 4 words, I just wanted to, it's empowering. I'm sending you this report so that you can read it, or I'm reminding you that you owe me this draft that I sent to you a few weeks ago, you know? And so that's been a bit of you have to be open to self-reflection and aware of your own minimizations that you maybe subconsciously implement in your day-to-day life. So that's one way that I am aware of my gender. I'm also gay. And so I'm aware of that as well in other ways. Um, and I'm a first generation immigrant as well. My parents came over from Eastern Europe. So it's not perfect. No organization is perfect, but we're really taking steps to increase our diversity and inclusion, whether it's among external applicants or internally in some of the programming that we do. But yeah, it's a lot of navigating environments that you don't necessarily know how you're going to handle them until you are in that situation, until you're the only woman in the room, until you're the only woman in that meeting. And you almost have to, sit up a little straighter, project a little louder, and come across with more confidence. Yeah, fake it till you make it sometimes.
Absolutely.
Ditto, ditto, ditto.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the idea of the behind the scenes mental work that goes into your jobs, your careers, even something as simple as creating an email and choosing language that's empowering. Do you all have any mantras, stories, or affirmations that you use on a day-to-day basis to keep going or to empower yourself in situations where that empowerment may be limited?
You know what? I'm gonna tell y'all honestly, a couple of things. One of my favorite mottos is "She designed a life she loved," because I like to just know that I exist by design and that I am able to create what I want. Again, I have 2 little girls. I need them to think that way too, and so I have to model that for them. And I have a therapist because I believe that therapy is one of the greatest tools that you can have in your toolkit. It's just you need somebody who you can talk to who has a degree in listening. And so I think that has helped me a ton. But one of the things that she has told me to do is you need a morning routine. So I have a sheet of paper where I write down physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. And I have activities in each of those buckets. And I try to take at least 10 minutes a day to do that. Whether it is I sit down and I'm just like, listen, I got a long day ahead of me. I need some bravery today. I need some courage today. Honestly, I need my words to be guided because what you said about the emails, I find myself minimizing my speech and softening my speech quite often. And even when I know I'm right. And it's simply because sometimes it's prescribed to us. There are stereotypes where if I say something too strongly, then it's, oh, look, she's being angry. And it's like, no, that's a leadership skill that if a man said it, he'd be passionate, he'd be confident. So some of those things are just like, we have to undo that and unpack that. But my daily practice of checking in with myself from a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical space just gets me aligned. And I thought when my therapist said, do that, I was like, that's so silly. And now I can't not start my day without just making sure that I've done a check with myself and I've aligned myself as well.
I'll underscore that, Jennifer. I think therapy is just so important, and whatever version of therapy that people decide to engage in, whether that's the sort of formal paid therapy or therapy through community organizations or whatever it is. And of course, we know there can be peer group mentoring as well. So therapy. So I just can't underscore that enough. I too practice daily meditation and I set goals. And every year, somewhere between January 1st and February 28th, I know it's a long period of time, but because of the work that I do, there's something called Black History Month, which takes up a lot of my time. Anyway, and so I also create a vision board. So I put on that vision board things that I think I want to do in that year, right? And I underscore things I've done from the previous year. I would show it to you, but right now all the little pieces of paper aren't posted yet. It's not February 28th yet. I still have time. So And so I would say that those are the things that I think about in my daily life, and then I try to set goals related to that. But I also set goals that are realistic and then aspirational goals, right? Not because I think sometimes we set goals that are just not reachable. And so sometimes my goal is just, as I said, as I'm an introvert, so sometimes my goal is like, Lisa, you must go to 2 parties this month, and you must talk to more than 4 or 5 people, right? So I try to set very modest goals for myself. And then there are 3 quotes that I live by. I'm going to read 2 of them, and one is for me. I know I'm not being humble in that moment, but it's just something that I say to myself. So the first one is from Lilia Watson. She's an Indigenous author, an Australian writer, and she says this. Quote, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. End quote. And so when I'm working with other people, when they're working with me, right, I want us to be in partnership. I want us to be working together in unison. The next quote is from my favorite author, James Baldwin. The world is before you, and you need not take it as it was when you came in. So that's all about innovation, transformation, and change, and that's what I'm about. I'm all about that. Let's change the world, and let's change it together. My next quote is mine, and I say, we are your asset, we are not your problem. And so what happens sometimes when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and particularly when we're talking about people with diverse backgrounds, Black people, people who are LGBTQ+, people who are differently abled, people who are immigrants, etc. When we're talking about them in our organizations, sometimes we say, they're the problem. What are we going to do about that problem? What are we going to do about that Gen Z? What are we going to do about those alphas? They're causing all this ruckus, all these problems. And what I say is how you frame something is what you get. So if you frame women as your problem, if you frame Black people as your problem, if you frame the Latinx community as your problem, then they'll be your problem. But if you frame them as your asset, as something, as leveraging, as thinking about those groups as your partners, then that's what you'll get. So we are your assets. We're not your problem. And protest is not your problem, it's your opportunity.
I wish I could just listen to you speak for the whole hour. It's hard to come after that. So daily mantras, I don't necessarily have one, but I do have a couple of little bits of advice that were given to me and a few things that my sisters and I say to each other. So that senior executive that I referenced before, she said, and it kind of sounds a little cliche, but she said, the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. And so when you feel like you are not ready to take the next step, you're ready. You're past ready. You've got to be willing to take risks and trust yourself and your intuition. And if it feels scary, good. Because if you're not learning, you're not growing. And you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So that's something that I try to hold on to at work. In terms of home life, I think I totally agree with everything that the others said about therapy. It's so important. I think it's really important to have some kind of a release, some kind of an emotional, mental, physical release, whether it's running, yoga, whether it's listening to music, whether it's playing the guitar, whether it's baking or knitting. You gotta have something that allows you to just let it out. And one thing that my sisters, and I have 2 older sisters, I'm the youngest, and when we sign off, we always say, I love you, I'm proud of you, you're beautiful. And it's just, things that we think women need to hear more from other women because they don't hear them enough. And yeah, so that's my little bits of tidbit.
I hope my 2 little girls are like you and your sisters.
Oh, they might, when they go through their teenage years, they might not get along, but when they get past that, you've got built-in lifelong best friends. Yeah.
Wow, I'm so thankful that I'm here right now, listening to all of the stories and wisdom being shared. It's invaluable, truly. The next question, more so, do you have any standout moments within your career that could be considered your first win that really assured you in your role or showed kind of like the value of the work that you're doing?
Okay, so as you heard about my journey, I transitioned from different organizations to different organizations. And I would just like to suggest that not all the people in my life at the time were like, this is a great move, Lisa. So I had left the faculty role, basically a very secure faculty role, and moved into an academic administrative post. My first real diversity and inclusion job. And I took a pay cut. I did a whole bunch of things. Okay, so this is seemingly on paper not the best decision, but I was committed. I was like, this is something I want to do, and I wanted to move into higher education administration. I was in this role where I had sort of left I was at an institution called Tufts University. I left a particular position and moved into this administrative position. About a year and a half into that position, I get nominated by this provostial thing, where the provost is the senior academic person at an institution. But more importantly, more important to the world, Google had started giving diversity and inclusion awards. That was their first year to give out those awards. I was one of the first recipients of a Google award. As a result of that, Harvard called me. And then the story goes, then I went and worked at Harvard. So I knew it was a win. And I also knew that if Harvard calls you, that's probably a good sign. You know, iffy, but I thought it was a good sign. So that was my early win. And this is years ago now, 15 years ago.
Oh, I'll go. I don't know. I'm still building wins, right? I'm 36, and it's easy. I think, for many of us, it's so easy to feel inadequate sometimes. It's hard to celebrate those moments. So honestly, I thank you for asking the question, because it forces me to celebrate. I would say that I actually reached the executive officer level at my organization at 34. And I was kind of like, and it's funny at the time, and the culture of my company is one of like, we're family. This is, we're all in it together. And so sometimes it's easy to feel like this was given to me. But in that moment, I showed up at our team meeting, and the president of our business was there, and all these executives, and my husband was there. And he's an attorney, so I thought he was like at work. So I was very shocked to see him standing there. And my boss was like, yeah, we called him in. And they did all this stuff for me, and they celebrated me in that moment. And my husband, when I went to hug him, he said, you earned this. And I was so stuck on, wow, I can't believe they gave me this promotion, and now I'm like an executive at a Fortune 100 company. And even sometimes now I'm like, oh, I hate to leave this company. And something, my husband's like, you earned everything you've gotten. And in that moment, I was like, I felt it. They had all these like Beyonce lyrics everywhere. I'm a huge Beehive fan. And I mean, it was a moment that spoke to me. And I was like, you know what? I did do this. And when my leader got up and she read my resume, I was like, I did do that. I did do that. I did do that. And so I just say that to say, you have to, one, surround yourself with the people that are going to tell you the truth, right? People that are going to gas you up. My husband was there for me, but honestly, my leader was there, and she was gassing me up. And then when my husband turned around, and he shared that all over social media. People were like, I've looked up to you. This and all these things that I never thought about. And so I say that to say, it's wonderful when you have a village that will lift you up, but please take the time to count your wins as you go, and see, like, when you graduate, when you publish in the newspaper, all those things, collect those wins and hold them close, because we get really caught up, especially with social media. I will look and it's like, oh, so-and-so's now the chief marketing officer. I don't even know that person. But all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, well, when are you going to be the chief marketing officer? I don't need to be. So keep counting your wins, and recognize that they can be really small, and those wins can be the ones that are the most impactful.
Yeah, that's huge. So I am chair for Bureau Equality. It's one of 9 diversity advisory committees that report to HR, and they are stood up to represent minority communities in the workforce. So there's one for the LGBTQ community, Latinx, Muslim, women, Near and Middle East, veterans, persons with disabilities, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Alaskan and Native American. There's 9 of them. I think that's 9. And Bureau Equality, so this is my 2nd year as the chair, and it's a collateral duty. We're a committee of 12 people from all over the country, and our job is to bring issues that affect the LGBTQ workforce to executive management and make recommendations on how to address them. So we have, for special agents who apply, it's a physical fitness test, and it's gender-based. So it underwent a review in the past couple of years, and it was a really good opportunity for us to make some change, particularly for transgender special agent applicants who, I will say, were not thought of when this policy was written decades ago. And including language in it that says, you know, you are scored based on your gender assigned at birth unless you have undergone a gender transition, and then all of the accompanying policy jargon and language that you have to go through, and you have to get it through legal, and you have to get it through HR, and you've got to go through the training division down at Quantico. And then we didn't stop there, because you can't just have a policy, you have to have the structural modifications to back it up. So if we have a transgender applicant, which I know we do, people have gone through, and we've been making changes to make sure we have single stall showers and gender neutral restrooms down at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So that's just one example of one of the things that we've done. And it's really, I love talking about it to groups like this, because most people just, there's a misperception that you can't be gay and work for the FBI. And it's great to kind of break down some of those barriers, particularly in a recruitment environment. So we won a director's award for that, and it's this like really embarrassing crystal statue that's on my desk that I try to hide because I hate attention. But yeah, it's important to own it. As both of you mentioned, it's important to be proud of the wins and take some time to flaunt them, because you work really hard for them. And a lot of times you are the only person who knows how hard you have to work to get there. So. Yeah.
Wow, I'm so amazed. I want to second Jennifer's comment of just being stunned by the panelists. I feel like there should be a charge for this. It's so phenomenal. So final question before we open it up to our students. What advice would you give the younger you when it comes to lessons you've learned, things that didn't meet your expectation or exceeded it? What advice would you give the younger version of yourself?
I would tell myself not to be so hard on myself. Just take it as it comes. It's a journey. And that someone else said this, and to surround yourself with people who are going to give you good feedback, both constructive, right? And you got to learn how to take that sometimes. Sometimes I have someone who works with me, the way he gives me feedback, sometimes I'm like, wow. But I've learned. And so, so that's the positive and the negative. But I would say, take it easy, Lisa. There's little Lisa, there's no rush. It's going to be okay. And you're going to make it through. You've got good friends, you know, and you make good friends, and then find people, surround yourself, you know, in all kinds of ways that will support you. I think that's what I would say.
I would say it's almost as important to know what you don't want as it is to know what you do want. And those come with experience, right? And experience comes with wisdom, or maybe it's the other way around. You've got to have the experiences to have the wisdom. And I had a job that I really didn't like for a while, and I had to go through it, but I had to go through it because now I know that I don't want that again, you know? And it's the same thing with relationships, isn't it? You know, you've got a partner and you're like, here's what I don't want in my next boyfriend or girlfriend, or yeah. So completely agree. Take it easy on yourself. You're doing the best you can. Yeah. And then know what you want, know what you don't want.
I love that. And I would add, when I was your age, I thought I was grown. And I'm 36, and you know what I'm realizing? So when you asked the question, what would I say to my younger self? I was like, you know what? I'm still young. And so what would I tell myself today as I plan and prepare for the next steps in my life? I say that part because giving yourself grace, not putting a lot of, societal pressures on you and timelines and things like that on yourself. When you're like 20 and 21, 30 seems like, oh my gosh. And then you hit 30 and you're like, wow, this is so awesome. And you reach a point where you're like, I can't wait for what 40, I mean, I can wait, but it's like, I can't wait to see what 40 is gonna mean for me. How I'll lean into like, what's my 50s? Like you start to assess life and the things that you're given and the opportunities you have completely different. When you all realize just how young you are, there is no rush. Like you have to give yourself the time to have those experiences, to get that exposure first and foremost. Really quick, one thing I'll give you, it's my 5-5-5-7, okay? This is how you build your network. You get 5 people to be on your personal board of directors. And these are the folks that are going to be your truth tellers, your coach, your mentor, your sponsor, your advocate. You tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Then you get 5 people that are in the positions that you want to be in, and you go to them and you say, like, I'd love to learn more. I want to shadow you. I want to understand what a day in your life is like. Then you get 5 other people that maybe are in a place of you that you can't even imagine, but they're just a broader global perspective. And you try to touch those people 7 times a year. LinkedIn post here, hey, I was thinking about you. You want to link up for coffee, saw an article that made me think of you. That's how you build your network. And those people, that posse, your personal board of directors will evolve over time. But that just allows you to have a bit of a framework on how to approach that.
I wrote a note about that, the 5-5-7. All right, so Suni, Annie, and Gigi, any questions that you all have for our panelists today?
I do. My question is, we kind of touched on this, but do you or did you ever have trouble seeing the impact that you're making with the job that you're doing? Like how were you able to like overcome, I guess, like the self-doubt in order to be like, wow, I am making a difference? Or like, was there a point where you were like, oh, I am helping others?
I can talk about that. I get some doubt, to be honest, every time I hear about another Black man being killed by the police. It's really real to me. I straddled this line of being in a minority and working for a police organization, but also I went out and protested at a Black Lives Matter protest. I held up signs with my friends and marched. And so it is a little, it just feels like a little bit of a tension at times inside, right? But you just have to stay true to yourself. And what has helped me is focusing on my work, what I do. I think I'm losing my train of thought here. Sorry. Can you remind me the second half of your question?
Yeah, just kind of how you overcome or were able to overcome self-doubt, or things that you do to work on yourself when you're doubting, like, am I doing this right? Or like, am I making a difference?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I do get that little internal tension because it's it's life or death. I mean, it really is life or death. And a lot of these rights that communities are still fighting for, they've been fighting for years and decades and hundreds of years. And it can be a little bit of a slippery slope if you see yourself as part of the problem and not the solution. So I see what helps me as it has been, okay, well, I'm going to be an agent of change from within then. And I'm going to try to use my position to try and progress some of these societal norms and views and help people see a better way.
I would quickly add to that. I do have what I usually do, and this goes back to what Jennifer says, is I have different sets of posses that I check in with. So I check in with those posses. And one of the very first things I do when I started an organization is I convene basically a stakeholder group. So I start to begin to work with various people to then say, okay, these are those, and they may not be people that I work with on an everyday basis, right? They're people that I know I can check in with periodically as I'm joining that organization. They may have been on my interview committee. They may be people who've reached out to me. They may be people I know who are interested in the work that I'm doing. So I develop that sort of internal stakeholder posse immediately. I would say the second thing that I also try to do is, because of the nature of my work, and this is something that, as Alexandra was talking, that I was thinking about, is that a lot of the times in my work, people hate me. They don't want diversity, equity, and inclusion. They don't want their organizations to change. In fact, they resist that. And so I can't always go by like a 360, that sort of those regular kinds of reviews that people have, because the feedback from that sometimes is positive, sometimes it's not. But I have what I call an 80-20 rule. It's a 75, 25, 80, 20. So if 25% of the people hate me, I'm like, I'm in the sweet spot. I'm pushing the envelope just right. So, right, so that's when sometimes it tips to 30, but if it tips to like 80, then I'm like, I probably need to change some things around, right? So I'm looking for that 75, 25, 80, 20, because I'm in a role that is about pushing the envelope, right? That's what I have to do to be successful. Now, not everybody's role is about pushing the envelope, and you want to push those envelopes differently sometimes, depending on the role that you're in. But certainly for my role, it's endemic to what I do. And so as a result, I try to say to people, and I also, when I teach leadership classes, I say to be an effective leader, you also need to think about 80-20, because 80-20 means, right, as a leader, 20% of the people aren't going to like you sometimes. And it does take courage. Absolutely, Alexandra, it takes courage to move into that. And I also say that the last thing I'll say is you have to think about yourself. What's your relationship to leadership, management, and followership? You cannot be, people who go into leadership positions, you're not a leader 24/7. If you are, you're a bad leader. So then you have to think about how you're a follower, how you're a manager, and how all of those things are working together, and how you're getting feedback about that journey in those different places.
Awesome. Let's take one more question. Annie or Gigi?
Gigi, do you want to go?
You can go if you want, Annie. I don't care.
Okay, I'll go. So you guys had talked a little bit about just like your proud moments that you've had throughout your career and some of those achievements, but I guess I'm just curious to know where you guys are now and if there's anything particular, whether it be personal or career focused, what goals you have, I guess, in the near future or long term.
You know, I'll jump in. I was thinking about this the other day, like, man, I work in financial services. I'm always thinking about retirement. I'm like, I got 30 years to go. I need to figure this thing out. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do for the next 30 years. But you know what? I have been intentional. Like I said, I choose kind of the companies and the things I work on based on my values and that has been purpose driven. And now a word that has come to me as I looked at this year, after the thoughts of, the pandemic changed everything. It changed the way we work. It changed the way we approach life. And quite honestly, it should change more. There should not be a return to normal. And so what I have in focus is there were two words that came to mind for me this year. First was freedom. You know, Alexandra, you brought up a great point, which there's a lot going on. There's another pandemic out there, and I just need our people to be free. Like, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so when the least of us are free, the rest of us are. And so that's kind of a focus for me. But the other word was impact. I can move from purpose to impact. And so now as I look out to the next 30 years or just whatever that may be, how can I march myself towards work that's impactful? That's why I'm doing things like this. I love talking to other people. I think about even in my career, how can I guide that towards impact? And so my thing there is I've been trying to think about that cross section between ambition and gratitude. When you're ambitious like myself, and I think like these other panelists, sometimes you can easily think about what's the next step, but also having that focus on gratitude. And today I am happy and I'm grateful and being good with that.
I couldn't say it better. Grateful, feel thankful. I also think, to piggyback on what Jennifer and Alexandra said, I'm not interested in the new normal. I don't want to go back to the normal. I just wrote a letter about the new different, and I gave it to my community, which is about how we move out of this idea of normal to a new different. And I think a new different will be much better for a lot of us. A lot of people think I'm going to be president of a university. To go back to what Jennifer said, people think that they can just plan your life for you. I don't know that that's what I'm going to do. I certainly would, Jennifer. But I say that because sometimes people plan your life for you, right? And I don't know that that's what I want to do. I am about impact. I am about giving back, and I have that skill base, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm also an avid photographer. I'm an avid gardener. I'm getting my pilot's license. So I have a lot of other things that I'm interested in. And so we'll see. Yeah. I try to keep busy. As I said before, I'm a curious person. So I think for me, what I think about next is, I think about retirement all the time, Jennifer. I'm not old enough yet, believe me. I count the days and then I'm like, oh, 20 years, just keep counting, Lisa. So, but I do think that for me, what's next is about impact. It's about giving back, and it's about sort of thinking about that new different, how I can contribute to a new different. And the thing that I just said to a group of young people is, maybe that is about me getting out of the way, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to change. Things are shifting. So maybe it's time for me to get out of the way and do something different. And I'm okay with that, right? I don't think relevancy is about doing the same thing that you've always done. Sometimes relevancy is about making space for other people. And so I think that's what I'm thinking about now. Thank you for that question, Annie.
Great question. Thank you. I haven't really thought about what I want to do next. I look at that question in terms of what I want to do next within the FBI. It's where I see myself for a very long time. And something that I'm noticing in a lot of the senior executive management is the personal sacrifices that a lot of them make to move up. And you're seeing a lot of hard decisions having to be made. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times for special agents to move up, to take a position at headquarters, in 2 years, you're moving your family to headquarters, to be a unit chief, and then 2 years after that, you're going out to Albuquerque for 3 years to serve as a assistant special agent in charge, and then you're going to go back to headquarters 3 years later to be a section chief, and then back out to Little Rock, who knows, to be a special agent in charge, and back to headquarters to be an assistant director. And that's not the kind of life that I want. That's not the kind of family life that I want for me and my wife, and maybe one day for our kids. And so being aware of where I'm willing to compromise and where I'm not, I think is going to guide a lot of what I do over the next 30 years. Some of my colleagues ask me, hey, when are you going to put in for that supervisor position? And I think, I don't want it. What are you talking about? I don't want it. And it is flattering when someone sees the potential in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself. I think sometimes the good supervisors are the ones who don't have the drive to be a boss. and they take an opportunity because someone comes around and says, hey, I think you'd be really good for this. Not because they say, I want that, but because someone else says, hey, I think you would be really good in this. And so I'm trying to look for those opportunities. And then outside of work, you know, we're all people outside of work, and it's important to have just, if not more, of a fulfilling life outside of work. So we have 2 dogs, and I think that's the limit for right now.
What kind of dogs do you have?
Well, we have an 11-year-old hound named Jackson, and we have a 4-month-old cattle dog named Arlie, who we just got a couple months ago. And I feel like a new parent. I'm not sleeping. I'm like, it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. Yeah. So who knows? Who knows? But maybe I'll take up your ideas of a vision board.
Right. So as we conclude today's roundtable, I once again just want to extend gratitude for all of our amazing panelists, Jennifer, Dr. Lisa, Alexandra. This is beyond meaningful. Thank you for making time in your busy schedules to pour into us with the wisdom, the celebrations, and the insight. It's truly been motivational. I wish you all well. Stay safe, stay warm. And please, to our students, attend the Women's Empowerment Conference happening March 12th. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.